alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah 18, verse number 56. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. 56. We only send the messengers as simply deliverers of good news as well as warners. Those who disbelieve argue with falsehood to defeat the truth, and they take my warnings, my proofs and warnings in vain. Divine intervention. Who are more evil than those who are reminded of their Lord's proof, then disregard them without realizing what they're doing. Consequently, we place shields on their hearts to prevent them from understanding it, the Quran, and deafness in their ears. Thus, no matter what you do to guide them, they can never ever be guided. Praise be to God. So, these verses are great reminders for us to help us understand that this is part of God's system, that, God only allows the sincere to understand the Quran, to access the Quran, And this is why you see people who even have access to the Quran, or even their mother tongue or in a foreign tongue, but they can understand it in any language. They can read it, but they're not able to grasp the true meaning of the verses or apply it in their lives. And thus, they argue with falsehood to defeat the truth, and take God's proofs and warnings, as it says here, in vain. And so God says, as a consequence, these are the people that are so evil that when they're reminded of God's proof, they disregard them, as if it's no big deal, and they make jokes about it, they mock it, and all kinds of things, and so specifically we see that more, I think, online than in the real world, because online people are behind closed doors and behind walls, and feeling more secure and more free and more open to criticize, and they don't feel that they have to even use good manners to even debate or in the first place. And they're very free with their thoughts, and you see that evil come out really openly, more so than you see outside, at least most of the things that, we see against, the Quran or against God, most of the time we see them, happen, online, like, as God says, behind walls or behind well-shielded buildings, because they feel more safe. But God says this is evil behavior. These are people that are evil because they don't realize what they're doing. And as a consequence, God blocks them out completely. So they have no access to the truth, and they have no access to the Quran. And it's almost like there's deafness in their ears. So when someone's deaf, no matter how loud you scream in their ears, they're not going to be able to hear you, because that connection that connects the ears to the brain, is somehow damaged, right? And so this is what happens, that, God creates a barrier, a divine barrier between you and them. So the information is flowing, but it's not getting to them, it's not getting into their brains or their hearts, and that's why God says, the real blindness is not the blindness of the eyes, but the blindness of the hearts, and so God says, thus, no matter what you do to guide them, they can never ever be guided, right? So there are people that no matter what you do, they can never ever be guided. Once they decide to be that way, they decide to take that position, God places a barrier. And this reminds me of the verse where God talks about when you remind them using the Quran alone, they run away in aversion. The moment they seek guidance, and the moment they seek guidance from anything other than the Quran as a source of guidance, we place, shields, right? I mean, this is paraphrasing. So, God blocks them as a consequence, and so they have no access to the truth anymore. They're no longer being guided. And it's a consequence of their evil behavior, which is not taking heed when they're reminded. So first, God allows them to hear the reminder, and they don't listen to it, and as a consequence, they're blocked. 58. Yet your Lord is forgiver, full of mercy. If he called them to account for their deeds, he would annihilate them right there and then. Instead, he gives them a respite until a specific, predetermined time. Then they can never escape. Right? So imagine, if the chance that we're given was little, then people would argue that they didn't get enough time, for example, right? But God has given us enough time. It's a long time. You're given a full lifetime, of chances to fix yourself and to choose God. And so, but God is telling us here, that he's so merciful. He even overlooks a lot of our sins. He is even patient with us. He even gives us chance after chance. But if he was to call us to account for our deeds now, he would annihilate the people right there and then. But he allows them until a specific time span to live, and then they're annihilated. And it's until a specific predetermined time, as it says. God says, many community we annihilated because of their transgressions. We designated a specific time for their annihilation. Valuable lessons from Moses and his teacher. Moses said to his servant, I will not rest until I reach the point where the two rivers meet, no matter how long it takes. When he reached the point where they met, they forgot their fish, and it found its way back to the river sneakily. After they passed that point, he said to his servant, let us have lunch. All this traveling has thoroughly exhausted us. He said, remember when I sat by the rock back there? I paid no attention to the fish. It was the devil who made me forget it, and it found its way back to the river strangely. Moses said, that was the place we were looking for. They traced their steps back. They found one of our servants, whom we blessed with mercy, and bestowed upon him from our own knowledge. Moses said to him, can I follow you, that you may teach me some of the knowledge and the guidance bestowed upon you? He said, you cannot stand to be with me. How can you stand that which you do not comprehend? He said, you will find me, God willing, patient. I will not disobey any command you give me. He said, if you follow me, then you shall not ask me about anything unless I choose to tell you about it. So they went. When they boarded a ship, he bore a hole in it. He said, did you bore a hole in it to drown its people? You have committed something terrible. He said, did I not say to you that you cannot stand to be with me? He said, I am sorry. Do not punish me for my forgetfulness. Do not be too harsh with me. So they went. When they met a young boy, he killed him. He said, why did you kill such an innocent soul who did not kill another soul? You have committed something horrendous. He said, did I not tell you that you cannot stand to be with me? He said, if I ask you about anything else, then do not keep me with you. You have seen enough apologies from me. So they went. When they reached a certain community, they asked the people for food, but they refused to host them. Soon they found a wall about to collapse, and he fixed it. He said, you could have demanded a wage for that. There is a good reason for everything. He said, now we have to part company, but I will explain to you everything you could not stand. As for the ship, it belonged to poor fishermen, and I wanted to render it defective. There was a king coming after them who was confiscating every ship forcibly. As for the boy, his parents were good believers, and we saw that he was going to burden them with his transgression and disbelief. We will that your Lord substitute in his place another son, one who is better in righteousness and kindness. As for the wall, it belonged to two orphan boys in the city. Under it there was a treasure that belonged to them. Because their father was a righteous man, your Lord wanted them to grow up and attain full strength, then extract their treasure. Such is mercy from your Lord. I did none of that of my own volition. This is the explanation of the things you could not stand. All right, so this is a very detailed account of Moses and his teacher that God appointed for him to teach him some lessons. And, we see that the three instances where, Moses witnesses him do these things, on the surface, it looks like something bad is going on, right? Like, why is he, doing the things that he's doing? He bore a hole in the ship, and he killed a young innocent boy, and then people who refused to host them, and he found the wall about to collapse, and he still did it for free, fixed it for free. And so these were the things that Moses was not able to comprehend, right? And because he was not able to comprehend, like, he objected, and was not able to understand the wisdom behind what was going on, what he was witnessing. And this shows us that, as the lesson says here, that there's a good reason for everything, right? We understand that the ship belonged to poor fishermen, and if he did not render the ship defective, there was a king that was going to confiscate the ship. And the same way, the boy's parents were good believers, and if this boy, grew up, he was going to burden the parents with the disbelief. As it says in the footnote for 1880, it says, Adolf Hitler was a cute and seemingly innocent child. Had he died as a child, many would have grieved, and many would have even questioned God's wisdom. We learn from these profound lessons that there's a good reason behind everything, right? So, I can't say much about the identity of this guiding teacher, whether he was a man or an angel in the form of a man, but and that's even something that probably is not even relevant, because if it was, God would mention it, right? But the thing is that the lesson here is the most important thing, which is there's a good reason behind everything, right? Things we see in this world, a lot of things we see in this world, and we get angry. We're not supposed to, but we get sad, or we object to the things that we see around us. And a lot of times, because we don't understand that God is running everything exactly. Like, God is allowing all of these things to happen for a specific reason. Like, you see, for example, a homeless person on the street. You may feel sad for him, but there's a very good reason that that person is homeless. There's a very good reason that someone is as rich as they are. There's a very good reasons that people may even get into some kind of an accident, like this man with his boat, was rendered defective. Now we know that in our case, God is there to protect us, and He can protect us. And seemingly sometimes it's true that bad things are a consequence of our own deeds, right? So if something bad happens to us, it's because of us. It's because we were out of God's protection, right? But that's not always the reason when we see something bad. Sometimes we see something that are bad, but it could be a blessing in disguise. Other times, there could be some other reason that we don't understand, right? But the point is that everything God does is for a good reason and is in accordance with God's will, right? And a submitter should learn to cheerfully accept that. And what would be the state of mind of us as humans as we see the world with that perspective? Is that we will not get sad and we will not get depressed or angry or upset. None of those things would happen. A submitter cheerfully accepts everything that happens to him or her or around him or her under all circumstances, right? And easier said than done, but this is what a submitter is supposed to or expected to behave like, right? And that would be a natural realization of something like that, knowing that everything is in accordance with God's will. There's a very good reason for everything. And as it gives the example of Hitler, for example, here, if Hitler died as a child, many people would object and even question God's wisdom and say, like, where is God? And some people will say God cannot control this and that and blaspheme against God, for example, right? Like, why did he allow such a young child to suffer? But you see that when he grew up, the amount of suffering and that he put on a lot of people, right? Which some people deny that didn't even happen, but we know it's definitely also the fact that it made into a footnote that, it did happen, right? And so all this stuff, we know for a reason that, there's a good reason for that too. For Hitler to grow up, there was a reason for him. He was meant to play a role in this world. Obviously, he was evil and satanic, right? But God allowed the people to suffer for maybe they deserved it, right? And maybe he allowed someone like Hitler to be in power so they could get the retribution that they deserved, or that they could suffer the persecution and then end up surviving and becoming stronger, depending on the people themselves, who they were and their experiences, God knows. But also we see a very good example of how God looks after the believers. Like there was this example of a person who was righteous, right? And he wanted his children, he wanted to, obviously, it would have been his desire to be able to look after his kids. And so to honor that, God allowed this to happen, for the wall to be reconstructed so the treasure could be saved until the boys grew up and reached maturity. They could extract their treasure, right? Otherwise they would be deprived. So that also shows that if someone's not righteous, then these things will not work out the way they wanted, for them or for their younger generations, like with inheritance and stuff. And we see that all the time also. And then also for the parents that were righteous, God did not want them to suffer with a child that was going to give them a hard time. And so God allowed that child to not be there, and God substituted with a child that was better, And so it says, we will that your Lord substitute in his place another son, one who is better in righteousness and kindness, right? So that's another thing. We know there are some people that will argue against it, I know, that would think that, when you lose a child, that, the child cannot be replaced with the same child or restored, which is just taking the messenger's words like literally and trying to dissect them, as some people have done in the past. But God can substitute, right? Always, if you have a child who's always a pain and always giving you grief and always giving you a hard time and just making your life miserable, God willing, none of those have those kinds of children. But apparently, if they did, God would take care of the situation, and in this case he did by substituting a better child, and he allowed that child also to go to paradise, as another thing, under 40, right? So there's many things that we can learn from this. Anyways, so God willing, I will continue. It says Zulkarnain, the one with the 2 horns or 2 generations, verse 83. They ask you about Zulkarnain. Say, I will narrate to you some of his history. We granted him authority on earth and provided him with all kinds of means. Then he pursued another way. When he reached the far west, he found the sun setting in a vast ocean and found people there. We said, O Zulkarnain, you can rule as you wish, either punish or be kind to them. He said, as for those who transgress, we will punish them. Then when they return to their Lord, he will commit them to more retribution. As for those who believe and lead a righteous life, they receive a reward. We will treat them kindly. Then he pursued another way. When he reached the far east, he found the sun rising on people who had nothing to shelter them from it. Naturally, we were fully aware of everything he found out. He then pursued another way. When he reached the valley between two palisades, he found people whose language was barely understandable. Okay, so this is the account of Zulkarnain, as it says, the one with two horns or two generations. And so this all also, kind of, with the two ties into the two communities, of Gog and Magog that we later read about in the next verses, which is interesting. And God says that he granted them authority on earth and provided him with all kinds of means. And so in the glossary, the messenger has put that this is probably talking about Buddha. And he says probably, so we have to take that into account. And then it says, then he pursued another way, and he found people that did not have clothes, I believe. And then he went to another place, and there were people that their language was barely understandable, right? So these are kind of what I see is maybe kind of pointing to some signs about these people, who they were, like their culture and their language, so people have an idea of maybe who they were, but God doesn't give away the full identity of where they are in these verses, and as we know that because that would also tell us the exact location for where Gog and Magog are going to reappear, and probably God doesn't want people to know those details, at least yet, right? So a lot of that information is hidden for us at this moment, but we understand that he was someone that had a lot of authority given to him by God, and later we see the rest of the story in the next verses about him. But these are subhanallah, like very interesting accounts, to read about, like especially Moses with his guiding teacher, and then Zulkarnain, very really amazing stories, from the Quran about real life accounts, obviously, not just stories. So, but subhanallah, there's a lot of wisdom in these verses, specifically, with the story of Moses with his guiding teacher, and also with Zulkarnain, obviously, how God allowed him to have all this power and authority and how he used it. Also, I find it interesting, where it says that, it says, O Zulkarnain, you can rule as you wish, either punish or be kind to them, right? So he had the ability and the freedom to be either kind or to punish. And then he says, as for those who transgress, we will punish them. As for those who believe and lead a righteous life, they receive a good reward from God, obviously, and we will treat them kindly, right? So that's also kind of along the same lines of the principle that the believers are kind and compassionate amongst themselves, and harsh and stern against the disbelievers and the hypocrites. And this is a quality of the believers. This is something that is not taught, but something that just comes natural to them, and for a good reason. This is God's commandment to us. Of course, it's be nice to just be kind to everybody and just treat everybody good. But that's not how it's supposed to be. There are limits and consequences, that people need to be aware of, and people that are disbelievers, people who are God's enemies, people who are destined for hell. We're not supposed to be kind to those people. Obviously, God is merciful enough with them that He's allowing them to live this life and letting them enjoy. But at the same time, we also understand that they're God's enemies, right? Imagine if I had a friend and someone was my enemy, and I tell him, hey, don't be nice to my enemies, and then you go in front of me and you're just being nice to them and kind to them, and that in front of the person you're being nice and kind to them, and your friend would be like, what is the matter? Are you my friend? Or what is going on, right? And so, or your father, for that matter, if the friend is more confusing, right? So if you think about it, like, you so it's the same thing, right? And so we have to put things in perspective, right? So we have to realize that if you understand that someone's destined for hell and you're certain about it, that you don't see any hope for this person, if this person's either a disbeliever or a hypocrite, right? So in that situation, you don't treat them the same way as the believers. God doesn't treat them the same way as the believers, and eventually they burn in hell, right? So is God being cruel now for putting these people in hell? No, they deserve it. It's part of God's system. And so why are we supposed to be kind to such people, right? We shouldn't be. If they have rebelled against God, if they're His enemies, right, it doesn't make sense, right? It would be nice to just be kind to everybody, but that's not what this world is about. We have to be kind towards the believers and harsh and stern with the disbelievers and the hypocrites. And at the same time, you give everybody time and chances. You give them benefit of the doubt and everything, until you exhausted all means and you realize that there's no way that this person is open to the message, and they have chosen to be with Satan, right? Would you be nice to Satan? Think about it if Satan came up, but right. So these are Satan's soldiers, the devils, that are part of his army. So it doesn't make sense for us to be kind to them. As in see in the case of Zulkarnain too. He had the liberty to be kind to everybody or to punish them, and he chose to be kind to the believers and harsh with the disbelievers, essentially. So with I think so. These are the verses that I read today. There's not much else I can talk about here. So if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free.
MashaAllah, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
I find it with the man who was teaching Moses, would it be safe would it be safe to say that a major lesson from that is to say that you know even if things don't make logically sense to us, if you just trust in God, there's always a purpose and a reason for everything.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And that's what the subtitle says. Is a good reason for everything. And sometimes we don't like it even, right? Like Moses didn't like it when he saw that. Yeah, but we have to accept that God is doing everything.
Brother Mashallah, I have a question about, disowning these people.
Mm-hmm.
We had the same discussion in the Turkish study,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can remember, we had also the same topic we talked about, and you gave some examples and you explained things about, when these people, if you truly think that they are never going to believe,
Mm-hmm.
if you come to that conclusion, then you need to disown them.
Right.
So the brothers and sisters were asking in the Turkish study, isn't this for the ones who are fighting you? If you have family members who are not fighting you, like they are neutral, but they don't believe, and you come to a conclusion that they're still not going to believe, but they are not attacking you, they are not harming you, or they are not like doing that kind of things. Do you still need to disown them, and do you still um, and the question was also, I think that's what they wanted to know, because they gave examples of their own families. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, one had a mother, which he or she still had contact with. They are convinced that they are never going to believe. It's an old woman. Um, so, should they not talk with them anymore, not have contacts anymore with them, or still like behave normal towards them, like not as enemies, but um, still go to them and see them and that kind of stuff, or totally just ignore them and never go to them again and
Mm-hmm.
don't talk to them anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, you know the answer. You know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, yeah, we what we told, what we said was like
Uh-huh.
exactly the same thing that you
Uh-huh.
mentioned in the study.
Uh-huh.
These people, like I asked them, okay, what is going to happen if these people are going to die? Like, what is going to happen with your
Mm-hmm.
father, with your mother, or with
Mm-hmm.
your spouse if
Mm-hmm.
he or she is going to die? Or do you
Mm-hmm.
think they're going to go to heaven or to hell? Then
Mm-hmm.
the answer is okay. I think they are going to hell. So, and which people go to hell? Like only the enemies of God are going to
Mm-hmm.
hell.
Right.
So, and like I give the exact example, exactly the same one. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
have an enemy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you're still going to be kind to them, etc. But um, I think they are still
Mm-hmm.
in the part where
Mm-hmm.
you have these verses, the example of Abraham, for example, but then they say, yeah, his father was like an enemy towards him. He was fighting him. He was trying to kill him. But our parents, they are not trying to kill us. They are not trying to
Mm-hmm.
harm us. They are not, actively fighting them. They're
Mm-hmm.
just neutral. They leave them like they are. So one of the sisters, she asked, like, should I not go to my mother anymore? She's like old. We don't talk about religion, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
like, um,
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what I, s- what I find interesting is that, for example, like if you think about it, right? Um, Let me share my screen again. So, where is it? Okay, here. Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, the thing is that when God says, um, people who are fighting you, right? So is it because God is worried about our physical safety that God is saying, don't talk to them? Because God is saying, for example, do not befriend the hypocrites, right? So is it because the hypocrite? So that essentially means, and that is what it means, right? They're saying, if your mother's a hypocrite, go befriend her, spend all your time with her. If your father's a hypocrite, doesn't matter. These are the categories of hypocrites that they have decided to exclude, right? That's not what even the messenger is saying. Like, if you listen to the messenger, he's talking about, and we can't use the word neutral because he's talking about people that are not neutral. Like, neutral is somebody who says, I am not decided, like, someone who's still making up their mind, like he hasn't made it mind. But someone who says, whose mind is made up, they're in the opposition. They're opposing God and his messenger. uh, but yeah, they're not fighting you, but they're still God's enemies, so you don't care. I mean, that's a perfect example of providing proof against yourself that you're not on the side of God, because you're saying, I don't care. You're saying to God, like, I don't care if this person's your enemy, as long as he's not my enemy. and as long as my life is not in danger, I'm going to befriend him. You know, how bad does it sound even, right? When we say that. So that's what it shows, really. I mean, people think that it's kindness, you know, but it's actually apathy. You know, you don't you're going out of your way to befriend people who are God's enemies. I mean, there's clear verses in the Quran. God says, you know, if your money, your business, I mean, imagine when it says your business is more beloved to you than God and his messenger. Does that mean your business is going to fight you? But no, it's not talking about essentially everything who's fighting against you, right? If a business you worry about, your parents, your siblings, you know, even your parents, it mentions that, right? So parents are not this special category who is excluded, you know? If you're going to apply those laws to, but they're not even saying that, right? They're using the parents or the relatives as a cop out, right? They're not even saying that a person on the street, they're going straight to their parents and saying they're not fighting us. So imagine what their belief is about people on the street that are disbelievers, that are going to hell, but they're not fighting them. They'll go and befriend them, you know. Like what is their view on that, right? It's interesting to know that. And then you see that they don't have an answer. They're confused, like, and then they'll say yes because based on 68 and 9 they say no, only people who are fighting you. But that's taking the verse out of context, because it's as it says in the messenger says, that's a general rule. So generally speaking, people who are not fighting you, you can befriend them. But then there's categories in those people, right? There are people that are not fighting you, but among the people that are fighting you, there could be people who could still, for example, believe, right? For example, someone could be fighting you today. He just found out about submission, let's say. He might be fighting you initially, but he may accept the message, right, in 2 days. So
Yeah, very
anyway,
much so. So, yeah, so I want to add something here. Maybe like this came just in my mind. So when you are living your normal life, you have still people around you who are not believers, and you still need to be in contact with them. For example, in your in a place where you work, you maybe have some customers. Like you still, it doesn't matter if they believe or not. Like even if they are enemies of God, like they are not going to believe. Most of the people are not going to believe, and they are destined for hell. So,
but the
but
thing is, at your
still,
work, the thing is also at your work, you can't find out if the person's an enemy of God or not, right? Because most people, you just have work relationship with them, right? So most of them are potential believers, even if they're disbelievers right now, right? There could be person could be drinking, could be committing adultery, could be idol
so
worshiper,
can
you know.
we? Yeah. So can we then say this really counts for the people who you really come to a conclusion that they are not going to believe after you give them the message?
Of course,
Like,
people that you have
can
no
you?
hope for.
Yeah, but so like when you have a place where you're working, then you have some colleagues, right?
Right.
Maybe you never talked about submission, you never talked about the miracle, etc. And you are there at the moment, but you know that at that moment, you know that they are not believers.
That's fine. You still treat them as potential believers, right? Because you
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
even talked to
So
them.
yeah, so and if we let's say then you go to someone, you talk to him, you give him the message, and you do this for like a few years, and you still conclude that this colleague of yours is not going to believe, right? Then this person
Yeah, they
should
declare their disbelief, right?
yeah. And then when you like come to that conclusion, then do you need to tell them, okay, from now on, I am not going to talk with you anymore. I'm not going to have any relationship with you anymore.
You don't need to announce it. You don't. You know, there's nothing says that you have to announce it that what you're going to do. You just don't have to. You know, you
Okay,
just don't know.
but you're still forced to be with that person in the same location, for example, or do the same things.
I mean, if you're forced, you're forced, right? I mean, if you're, for example, if you're forced to eat a pork, you know, God knows you're forced. You're not going to be punished for it, right?
So, brother, the thing what I actually want to ask is this, right? But I think it is, okay? So, when someone is talking about their parents, for example, where they come to a conclusion that they're not going to believe, they're also thinking about other people, like around them in their social life, like in their workplace or like outside or anywhere. they can think that, okay, I am having some social relationship with these people that are not my family. Why can't I still have the same social relationship with my parents? Do you know what I mean? Or what I
Yeah, but I mean, those are people that are potential believers, and you're talking about a person who's talking about someone who's destined for hell. That they've concluded this person is destined for hell, and they still and they're God's enemy, even though they're not my enemy. They're God's enemy, and they're destined for hell, and they still want to be kind to them and meet them. And there's a good audio actually, and there's a very there's a good reason for everything as we read today, right? I mean, God needed to expose people's thoughts. Like, I don't like saying this, but God had to expose people's thoughts who were insisting on this idea, and you guys know what I'm talking about. And so I didn't. I mean, there's an audio, I could conveniently find it, and I will find it now, since we're talking about it again. But I didn't present it, And this is an audio where the messenger is talking about a beggar, right? Now the beggar is not fighting you. He says the beggar declares his disbelief. The beggar needs help, right? And the messenger says, no, you don't. They said, I don't help them. He said, no, you don't help them. He says, you run for your life. Imagine. So we're talking about someone who's not fighting you. He's just someone who declares his disbelief. You know that the reason why Abraham disowned his father was not because he said he was going to kill him. I mean, if someone says they're going to kill you or they're not going to kill you, what difference does that make, right? The difference it makes, it clearly demonstrates the amount of hostility that they have against God, right? And how their mind is made up, right? But the messenger also talks in detail, very detailed actually, and I think it's just a matter of us looking those audios and videos where he talks about using your, and I believe this isn't more in the audios, where he talks about using your own judgment. You use your own judgment, knowing the person, about the person, to understand if there's hope for them or not. If you come to the conclusion that there's hope for that. I mean, like, I am not saying these things out of my own opinion, right? These are things I've heard from the messenger. So God willing, we should get back to the, hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say. And I'll find those audios too. I think the one about the beggar is easy for me to find, and also trying to find the other ones maybe. But the one about the beggar is pretty clear. Like, it was initially when I heard it, like it was news to me too, because I had heard from other people the same thing about parents. Like, no, just parents are like parents or a special.
No, he has also a voice recording about the parents, brother, where he clearly says, like, are they God's enemies, yes or no? That's it. Like, it's actually very simple. Like, the reason why I'm also asking is because the brothers and sisters asked if we can speak about this topic also in this study. Because we already told them, they were asking, we said, yeah, but we already spoke about this, and this is like definitely the conclusion, that if you really conclude that they are like enemies of God, they are destined for hell, then you really need to disown them.
Yeah, exactly. And, they have to think about it logically, right? Like, why do you disown someone when they says that they want to kill you, but you don't disown them otherwise, even if you know they're going to hell, right? God is going to put them to hell, but you don't want to let go of your relationship unless they say physically, I'm going to come and kill you.
No, but the fighting you was not
about God.
No, fighting the thing that we spoke about, like fighting you, was not in the way of fighting you physically. It was like fighting you about religion,
about
discussing
religion,
with you.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter, right? That's just an indication that they're against it, right? But that's just a symptom. Someone could be against your religion, and then tomorrow they could be for it.
And in reality, I think, but in reality, actually, in real reality, our parents' bodies are the parents of our bodies, not our souls. In reality, we are not even related with each other. Only believers are really related with each other.
Yeah.
So actually, they are not our parents. Like, I remember saying this once to my father when we had this discussion about submission, and in the end, I said, like, and he was, active. Yeah, like he was like yelling and screaming, and he was saying, "Yeah, do they teach you that you need to be unrespectful towards your father? You know, I'm your
Mm-hmm.
father, and you should be more respectful, etc." Then I told him, I said, "Listen, your body is the father of my body, but my soul and your soul, we are
Mm-hmm.
created at the same time, and we have the same age.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think you're special, you know." Yeah, most of the times they think like that, right? So they think because they are the parents. And we
Mm-hmm.
also read this verse in the Quran. I don't know if Abdullah can remember or bring that specific verse. I think it was in the Haifa 164, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about um, even if your parents are fighting you, you still need to be kind to them, something like that. There was this verse. If Allah can help to find that
It
verse.
says if yeah, yeah, if they tell you to force you to commit idol worship, don't listen to them, but
No,
otherwise,
no, no. Yeah, but still be
treat
kind.
them kindly. Yeah. So this is not talking, but this is not talking about people who are hopelessly stuck, right? It's just saying in general, like your parents could be idol worshippers, so they could become submitters later on, right? That's not the thing. But if you find that they're destined for hell, then that's separate, right? So God willing, I'm gonna present uh, the audio that I'm referring to. God willing, I think I know which one it
Yeah,
is.
brother. And one of the things what one of the things that we are missing in the Turkish studies is
Mm-hmm.
that not all the like we have these brothers and sisters who don't speak English, so they didn't have the opportunity to like
Listen to the
listen to the
audios.
audios, and
Mm-hmm.
and not all of the audios are
Mm-hmm.
transcripts in Turkish.
Mm-hmm.
So like these brothers and sisters are like in submission like for 10 years, maybe 8 or 10 years, or maybe longer. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
exactly. But meanwhile, like we always every day listen to these audios, so like we are more
Mm-hmm.
familiar with the things that the messenger has said.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is one of the reasons
Mm-hmm.
that when we're talking about this topic, where the messenger is clearly saying things about like that the parents are enemies and we need to disown them,
Mm-hmm.
that they have some small other thoughts maybe. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that after listening to the videos or reading the subtitles, that will inshallah help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I think there's also like a loss of communication here in the fact that like to understand or to like come to the conclusion that somebody is God's enemy, like that is a heavy assessment, right? Like it's not just a simply like if they were to die today, would they go to hell, right? Like the idea is there's constantly hope unless they completely reject, to like to the point where they're hostile towards you. I think that's the big thing that a lot of people are miscommunicating. To understand that somebody's an enemy of God, like that's a bold statement, right? To lose all hope
Yeah,
of them possibly believing, and like
yeah,
I think that could be a thing that's lost if I'm not
yeah,
correct.
yeah, but brother, there is also this thing, right? So God could also say that like you can never know who is going to believe or not. It's only to me. And then the messenger wouldn't say, you really need to figure out and you need to come to a conclusion. So this means that we can come to a conclusion. Because or else why would he say that,
Yeah,
right? Why would he say, okay,
even the verse says, once he realized that his father was destined for hell, he disowned him. Right? That's the verse from the Quran. So how did Abraham realize that his father was destined for hell? Right? So when you have no hope, he lost hope for him, right? That's when he realized. When you realize someone's going to hell, that means you have no hope for them. Literally, that's what it means, right?
yeah, and the messenger says also it's a personal thing. He says like you need to figure it out yourself, like because this whole experience of knowing these persons, knowing these people around you, like your spouses, your parents, or your children, you are actually the one who truly knows them, right? And then you can definitely come to a conclusion. Okay, this person is definitely not going to believe anymore. Like you, I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you definitely can come to that conclusion. And of course, there is also one thing. It says that the believers are, every believer is going to come to a situation where they need to choose God or, their parents, their spouses, their children. So you need to make a decision, right? In the footnotes, it says that, like, of course, in these families, if you have a submitter, like because most of the people are not going to believe, so in a family with a few children and a spouse and kids, etc., you probably always going to need to make a decision, right? So and it's a difficult decision, of course.
Yeah. So
But
if
we
you
need to make a decision.
yeah, also if you go to Quran study number 39, so this would be at about 5 minutes and 45 seconds. So I'm gonna go to 39. About 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Friends who declare themselves as disbelievers are enemies of God. So this is the chapter title. Friends, you can examine evidence. They're not enemies of God. If you find someone who's opposing God as a messenger, what does this tell you? Okay, so yeah, so maybe we should listen to it from like 3 minutes onwards, right? So I'll try to play it. I don't know how much of it we will understand, but I'll play it, God will.
You may befriend them and be equitable towards them. God loves the equitable. So these are not considered enemies of God if they are not actively opposing you. They may be curious, they may be still looking, they may be still examining the evidence.
It's buffering. So these are people who are examining the evidence. He's talking about YouTube. Come on. Do I have audio 39 on my computer locally? I can play that from there. It stopped on me. 39 I have, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, where is it? Yeah, I have 30. No. Oh, MP3. Yeah. No. One sec. We'll get it. Audios number 39. Download it. Okay. Transferring. Is my internet slow maybe? Yeah. Yeah, so that, I'm going to try to refresh my browser window maybe. 2 minutes, 56 seconds.
This is, and do not evict you from your homes. You may befriend them and be equitable towards them. God loves the equitable. So these are not considered enemies of God if they are not actively opposing you. They may be curious, they may be still looking, they may be still examining the evidence. You'll be able to tell if they are hostile or not. Number 9 tells you that God enjoins you only from befriending those who fight you because of religion, evict you from your homes, and band together with others to banish you. You shall not befriend them. Those who befriend them are the transgressors. If you are friends of somebody who's opposing God and His messenger, what does this tell about you? Yeah? Hmm? Yes. Or worse. Yes. You have to make your stand very firm on the side of God alone. If somebody is idolizing Muhammad or Jesus or Mary or some saint with God, you have to make your stand known that you don't like that you are not their friends until they abandon their
So
idolatry
not their friends until
and
they
dedicate themselves to God alone.
yeah.
Otherwise, we will be like them.
Otherwise, you'll be like that.
This is throughout the Quran we see this. If you don't do that, you are like them, as guilty as they are.
Yeah, for example, you work in the same office with them, and provided they don't bother you, pay your own way.
Yes.
They pay their own way, and they don't bother you. You meet
Right.
in the same restaurant.
Right.
You meet in the same clubs and all this kind of play the same
Brother,
game.
are you playing
the
the voice?
Yes.
Because I don't hear anything.
Provided they
You
don't
don't hear
bother you.
anything?
But then,
Doesn't bother you, they
No,
don't fight.
nothing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't hear this
oh,
the sound recording.
oh my God.
I think you're the only one who's hearing it.
Okay, okay. Why is that though? Okay. Yeah, let me try one other thing. Hold on. Oh, really? Okay. Hold on. Let me play it again.
Fighting you,
yeah, you can
It's
talk
okay.
to them. They're neutral.
Yes.
Neutral, yeah.
they're neutral.
Yeah,
There's
it's
still,
okay.
there's still hope for
I
them.
think it's playing on YouTube, but not for you. Okay. Okay. So, in that case, I think maybe you can play it.
I can try.
Maybe
Like I'm using my phone. Still, is that still possible?
No, just so you need another device. So
Oh
what
no.
I can do is maybe I can get my other device and I can just play it.
Okay.
Okay, because yeah, I think that will probably be better. So we got the iPad here. Alright, so I'm gonna pull it up here.
Yeah, brother. So
I'm just playing right now.
minute 12, it says parents have a special position. You only have permission to disobey idolaters and forcing. Have permission to disobey idols forcing. Yeah, but that's in the Quran verse. Okay, brother. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, it's okay. So I'm gonna play it from like 3 minutes onwards. Okay.
And do not evict you from your homes. You may befriend them and be equitable towards them. God loves the equitable. So these are not considered enemies of God if they are not actively opposing you. They may be curious, they may be still looking, they may be still examining the evidence. You'll be able to tell if they are hostile or not. Number 9 tells you that God enjoins you only from befriending those who fight you because of religion evict you from your homes, and band together with others to banish you. You shall not befriend them. Those who befriend them are the transgressors. If you are friends of somebody who's opposing God and His messenger, what does this tell about you? Yeah? Yes, or worse. Yes. You have to make your stand very firm on the side of God alone. If somebody is idolizing Muhammad or Jesus or Mary or some saint with God, you have to make your stand known that you don't like that you are not their friends until they abandon their idolatry and dedicate themselves to God alone. Otherwise, we will be like them. This is throughout the Quran we see this. If you don't do that, you are like them, as guilty as they are.
Yeah, for example, you walk in the same office with them, and provided they don't follow you, pay your own way.
Yes.
They pay their own way, and they don't follow you. You meet
Right.
in the same restaurant.
Right.
You meet in the same clubs and all this kind of play the same game. As a place to look at in the evening. Provided they don't bother you.
They don't bother you. They're not fighting you.
Yeah, you can talk to them. They're neutral.
Yes.
Neutral, yeah.
They're neutral. There's still hope for them.
There's still hope for them, right?
So there's no problem. You talk to them. You play around, joke with them. Religion aside.
Exactly. Yeah, verses 8 or 9 are really are the rule that covers the umbrella rule.
Can we do quick to them? Different approach with you.
If they're still neutral, yes. Especially if it's going to help them.
They declare themselves.
Yeah, when they say neutral, right?
Declare themselves.
Neutral means that they're not against it. They're still like examining, you know. So when they say no, they're not fighting. They're neutral. They're just kind of convoluting the concept a little bit. So I'll continue playing.
They are non-believers. Can we do quick to them?
No, you better run away from them. They declare themselves as unbelievers. You better.
They need help.
They need help. They're talking about the beggars.
One kind or the other. Help.
I'm gonna play that part again. Okay, that's important.
Shall we help them?
Not if they declare themselves as unbelievers. They're enemies of God.
If they dedicate themselves as
You have to
unbelievers,
run away
they're
from
enemies of God, they're
Run away.
disbelievers, you have to run away from them.
This is what, let's read it again. Number 9. God enjoins you from befriending those who fight you because of your religion. Evict you from your homes and band together with others to banish you. Better yet, if you look at verse number 1, it says, "O you who believe, you shall not befriend my enemies and your enemies." So a person who declares himself as an unbeliever is an enemy of God.
See, a person who declares himself as an unbeliever is an enemy of God, so you're supposed to run away from them. So, I mean, as long as they're neutral, meaning like they're still examining the truth, they haven't made up their mind, right? So, yeah, you can befriend them, and these are your coworkers, these are anybody, you know, your parents and stuff. So you can befriend them. But he's talking about someone who declares himself as an unbeliever. This person's asking him, and he says, but he needs help. He says, do you help them? He says, no. He says, run for your life. You want me to play it again? I think it was clear enough.
Yeah, brother, it was very clear, mashallah.
Yeah.
So the requisite is somebody who claimed, like, who actively chooses to be an unbeliever, essentially.
No, someone who decides that he's not going to believe, right? And you conclude that there's no hope for that person, right? Now, this example that he gave of someone fighting you and stuff like that, this is indicative of this person's belief, right? So this person has demonstrated, in other words, that he's not going to believe, right? So at that point, this person's an enemy of God. But as opposed to someone who is deciding to just keep an open mind, you know, and figure, and you feel that, you know, they might come to guidance sooner or later, right? Or maybe they will, so you have some kind of hope for them, right? So then it's fine, right? But we're talking about someone that you have exhausted all means, and you know for a fact that they're not going to believe. So they're unbelievers, right? They're disbelievers. And so he clearly says that a person who is an unbeliever is an enemy of God, right? We all heard that, right? A person who's an unbeliever is an enemy of God, and you disown that person. And he's talking about a beggar. Now, the beggar is not fighting you, but the beggar declares himself as an unbeliever. He clearly declares that, he's not going to believe. And so, but he needs help. You don't help them. You said you run away from him. So coming to the parents, let's say, or anybody for that matter, right? Parents are no special in that sense. If you have parents who are nice to you and everything, and you have hope for them, right? That's the key. When you use your judgment, right? And when we say hope for them, it's not, hope is not like wishful thinking, right? Hope is you, knowing the situation, judging it based on the information you have, realistically, based on the knowledge that you have of them, you conclude that this person is not going to believe no matter what. That's the thing we're talking about, right? We're not talking about parents who are neutral or who just haven't made up their minds, or just parents who are quiet about it and you haven't talked to them much about it. In my situation, for example, my parents initially were kind of against it, but very quickly, were very sort of supportive in a way that they weren't agreeing with me, but they weren't disagreeing with me either. So it was kind of a very confusing situation. And then they weren't saying anything bad about my religion, but somehow, like, I never really got an opportunity to openly have discussions with them. So I just kept the door open, and I was just always kind in that sense. But if someone has parents where they have given them the message and they've tried, and they've realized that no matter what I do, this person is not gonna believe, right? And they come to that firm conclusion, then at that point, you cannot befriend them, So that is, I mean, a specific situation where you know for a fact that no matter what I do, this person's an enemy of God, right? A disbeliever is an enemy of God. God says in the Quran, there's a verse that says, indeed, the disbeliever is an enemy of his Lord, right? So someone who's an enemy of God, is a disbeliever, whether it's your parents, your children, or your siblings. Once you know for a fact that they're going to hell, if they die today or tomorrow, or when they're going to die, they're going to go to hell, then it becomes your responsibility to disown them, right? Unless you want to suffer the consequences yourself. But the thing is that we don't know sometimes, like, for example, I mean, we don't have to be like wishful thinkers, like, oh, you never know kind of thing, right? But we understand that these are the people that can change based on their circumstances, like they're just undecided, right? Or they're just still evaluating, right? So those kinds of situations, I mean, you have to be kind to them. If they tell you to set up idols, obviously, don't listen to them, and at the same time continue to treat them in the best possible manner. But you do that for every other believer, I mean, every other potential believer too, right? Because they're potential believers, you try to woo them to the message, right? And he's saying the same thing about the parents too. You try to woo them to the message, but when you don't have hope for anybody, you don't woo that person, right? At that point, because you're wooing a person who you have hope for. That's why you're wooing them. But a person you don't have hope for, I mean, you don't woo them, right? Because they're not going to believe. So if they're enemies of God, right? I mean, we have to understand, like, what happened, why we're here in this world. I mean, who's going to hell? Why are they going to hell? I mean, there's no such thing as someone who's not an enemy of God and they're burning in hell, right? God wouldn't do that to anybody except people who are his enemies, which are the disbelievers. So we have to put things in perspective. And yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing, but true. You know, it's going to be unpleasant, yes, but you know, we have to show that we are on God's side. You know, by
Yeah,
making that
and
stand.
showing like still keeping them as friends or like not disowning them, um, and trying to do that because you like trying to be merciful towards them. This
Mm-hmm.
means actually that you are trying to be more merciful than
Mm-hmm.
God, who is
Mm-hmm.
putting them in hell.
Mm-hmm. And
So
you know the verses that talk about loving people, right? You love them. You know, God says, you know, you're befriending people with whom. Have you noted those who befriended people with whom God is angry, right? So
Yeah, extending love and friendship
friendship
towards
to
them when
them,
they're
yeah,
clear
exactly,
enemies.
yeah. So there's clear verses about that. Yeah. So John,
Yeah, it's not.
I played the audio. Since well, I think you
Yeah,
were
I
not
cut was
there.
cut out.
So it was Surah. It was, sorry, not Surah. It was audio number 39 at about 3 minutes onwards. We played
Okay.
that, and he's talking about a beggar who declares his disbelief, and he says, and he needs help. Someone asks him, you know, but he declares disbelief. He said, "Do you help them?" He says, "No." He says, "You run for your life," you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, if somebody's heading to hell and they insist on it, like you don't want
Mhm.
to have anything to do with that person. I mean, me
Mhm.
personally,
Mhm.
it's something like that. It's definitely a very difficult test, especially if the person's close to you. But I mean, that's kind of the
Mhm.
essence of it, because I mean, not
Mhm.
that's what the verses reflect on. Like your parents, your siblings, this person. So,
Mhm.
and it takes a lot of time and thought.
Mhm.
It's not just something you wake up one day and then you come to like kind of a conclusion without a substantial amount of evidence. Like for
Uh huh.
me personally, it was a lot of, it was very difficult, but when it became clear to me, it was like more clear than anything, like that, it is true you can befriend such wicked people, or lie to yourself, because you saw exactly what you said. You lie to yourself and have this wishful thinking under the guise of, false hope when in fact, like you got enough signs and confirmation, and it's just become evident to you about their disbelief. And that's when you have to make your decision, because if you don't, you're gonna start getting what I believe,
He, he says
pinches
unless
or
the messenger
punishment.
says unless you want to be like them.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
why would you, like, if you like you have a spouse or your friend and they have a clear enemy, why would you go and hang out with your spouse's enemy or your best friend's enemy, and like be nice to them and want anything to do with them? So the same. I mean, it shouldn't be. People shouldn't think anything. Expect to do anything less than for the creator. Um, yeah,
Yeah. If even if you hang out with the spouse's friend, you're still gonna be in trouble. You know that, right?
yeah, completely. Yeah, completely. Yeah, right. That's a good point, brother. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, it's and another thing is like, um, uh,
Yep. I think God disconnected.
yeah. So I'm alaikum. I got disconnected for a second. But another thing too, like, I mean, just personally, it's one of the ways I was tested. Like, there's going to be conveniences and other things you're going to have to sacrifice. Like, let's say cutting off such person, you're not going to have some, like, let's say certain amenity. Like these were like real examples like I went through But then, it's like I'm not going to give Satan an opportunity to claim me and sit here and compromise and be like, no, I'm still going to befriend like this person and like, because I have these benefits. Like if I have to disown him, then I'm not going to be able to, let's say have a place to, let's say repair a vehicle, for example. Like just little things that could mean a lot in different situations, or just other things that you lose, and it's like, okay, well, what's more important, this or having these, fake benefits or luxuries? Like, no, definitely that's something believer or submitter would willingly sacrifice, like not wavering or compromising. That's personally, that's
Yeah.
stuff, and thank God I made the right decision.
Yeah, John, but I was just curious. So, I think you had mentioned that this about this other person since you brought it up. Like, you were saying that you were going to show them the mathematical miracle, though, right? And you thought maybe if they look at the mathematical correlation,
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's I've thought about it more, and I have to talk to like my other family member about some recent stuff that just happened. I don't know.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's just reminding me a lot of
Mm-hmm.
more about you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did think about it, they they know about the miracle and stuff.
Okay,
Like
right.
they're like it's just the conversation I actually had last night.
Mm-hmm.
Some recent stuff that had come up. It's so apparent like that this person is like
Mm-hmm.
really bad, and then I
Right.
forget some of these things. Like really
Mm-hmm.
really bad,
Mm-hmm.
like wicked.
Mm-hmm.
From like wicked in the sense of like how much of an enemy of God they are.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it just confirms even more, like
Mm-hmm.
about the truth in the Quran, and like disowning people, because you can't be friends with people who want to tell themselves. And I know because I personally like was a year ago I was kind of balancing it out, but I know myself and I know the thoughts I was having and the compromises I was trying to you know,
Mm-hmm.
like lie to myself. Not I didn't do it, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like, they came across with like, what if I just tell myself, like, create this false hope? That way I
Mm-hmm.
can compromise and
Yeah.
continue to associate. And then that thought, but immediately, like, I knew it was wrong. Like in my heart, I know it's not the right thing to do. I know I'd be compromising, and then I also got some very evident signs too from God about it. And then after too, I did it. I noticed like improvements in my life too,
Mm-hmm.
uh, directly correlated to that test, if you want to call it that.
Mashallah.
Mashallah.
Yep.
Yeah, run for your life. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true. 'Cause that's really what you're doing. You're running
Mm-hmm.
for your life. I mean, even Jesus said you would come like the people you hang around. I mean, it's so if you start hanging around them or not,
Mm-hmm.
or you have still some stuff to do with them, you haven't
Mm-hmm.
defined them, you're gonna join them. You're gonna pick up the traits and qualities of that person, or even their mindset, and then that person's heading to hell, so they're gonna take you there with them,
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently or indirectly. So yeah, it's right.
Yeah. God willing, I'm also going to play another part of this audio because I think it looks like it might be interesting. So this is from 16 minutes onwards. I'll try to play it.
Because this is the time of the Prophet Muhammad. It is not applicable to us. Starting at verse 10. Number 13, O you who believe, do not befriend people with whom God is angry. This repeats verse 1 and verse 9. O you who believe, do not befriend people with whom God is angry and who are hopelessly stuck in disbelief. It's very important, hopelessly stuck in disbelief.
Hopelessly
You have
stuck.
to use your own judgment if the person, there is hope that the person may become a believer or not.
See, he says you have to use your own judgment, right, to see if this person will become a believer or not. So why do we have to use your own judgment if it was just that, okay, if they're just fighting you, right? Then you didn't have to use your judgment, right? But he says you have to use your own judgment.
And if there is hope that the person may become a believer, you got to be as diplomatic as you can to help them. You have a lot at stake, by the way, when you do that. Because when you help somebody come to the truth, you get a lot of credit. So that gives us incentives, lots of positive incentives to do that. So if you sense that there is hope, that the person may become a believer, you should be as diplomatic as can be, and you use your own judgment in that.
That's well, quite a lot of experiences being clear.
It's a kind of lot. I mean, it says it so perfectly and beautifully. And I mean, yeah, it's really it's not easy at all. And I mean, and then another important thing is like using our judgment is kind of what I was I guess referring to earlier. Because using your judgment includes your I guess part of the way you're thinking and you're testing. So if you want to actually make the right decision, you're sincere about it. God will help you. But if there's something wrong with you, wrong in your heart, or you want to compromise, then your judgment obviously is going to lean, the wrong way. So it's a test, for people. Like using your judgment, you have to use good judgment. I mean, and of course you have to, it's not something you do overnight. It's something that it definitely, yeah, God gives us, he said, oh, those who have an intellect, take heed and stuff. So that's, that's really, so I'm glad you played that. Mashallah.
All right. Are there any other comments or any questions? Any off-topic questions? If not, then okay. So if there are any other, sorry, my mic was off on the YouTube. So if there are any other comments or questions, anybody, any off-topic questions, we can answer them. If not, then God willing, we can conclude our study. So thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
So God bless you all.